All right, let's journey back in time. We're heading to an era of just unparalleled brilliance in Indian history, a time of legendary kings, incredible art, and scientific breakthroughs that literally changed the world. We are talking about the Gupta Empire.
Now, if you've ever stared at a history exam, a question like this might look familiar, right? Here's the thing. If you can get a solid grip on the Guptas, you've pretty much mastered a huge piece of ancient Indian history. So stick with me, we're going to answer this question and a whole lot more.
So here's our game plan. We'll see how the stage was set in a fragmented land. Then we'll meet the legendary rulers themselves. We'll dig into how they actually ran the place. And then, the really good stuff. The explosion of culture and science that made it a golden age. And finally, we'll see how it all came to an end. Okay, so picture this. The mighty Mauryan Empire is long gone. In its place, India has become this patchwork of smaller kingdoms, all vying for power. For centuries, there was no single unifying force. It was a total power vacuum, just waiting for a new dynasty to step up and reunite the land. And sure enough, a new power did rise. Around 320 CE, out of that historic Magadha region, the Guptas began to make their move. The dynasty was kicked off by a man named Chandragupta I, and he was smart. He made a brilliant strategic move, marrying a princess from the powerful Lichavi clan. That single alliance gave him the legitimacy and the resources to start building an empire. Of course, an empire is nothing without its leaders, and the story of the Guptas is really the story of a line of brilliant, powerful rulers who didn't just conquer land, they shaped an entire era. Let's meet the key players, the architects of this age. It all starts with the founder, Chandragupta I. He's followed by his son, the unstoppable conqueror, Samudragupta. Then comes Chandragupta II, who takes the empire to its cultural peak. And finally, Skandagupta, the man who would become the empire's last great defender. Now, Samudragupta, he was on another level. He became the empire's great unifier. Historians actually call him the Napoleon of India, and believe me, he earned that title. The man was a military genius. He launched massive campaigns, sweeping across North India and pushing south, forcing southern kings to bow to his authority. So you might be asking, how do we know all this? Well, the proof is literally carved in stone. It's called the Prayag Prashasti. This incredible inscription, written by his own court poet, Harisena, gives us this detailed, glowing account of all his military victories. And that, right there, answers our opening question. The Prayag Prashasti is the story of Samudragupta. His successor, Chandragupta II, who you might also know as Vikramaditya, he had a different style. Where his father was the great military conqueror, Chandragupta II was the great consolidator. He used diplomacy, trade, and strategic campaigns to secure the empire, bringing in an age of incredible peace and prosperity. It was so prosperous, in fact, that the famous Chinese traveler Fa-Hien visited and wrote all about the empire's glory. But peace never lasts forever, does it? The last of the great Gupta rulers was Skandagupta. He inherited this massive, powerful empire, but his entire reign was basically consumed by one single existential threat: fighting off the relentless, devastating invasions of the Hunas from the northwest. So, we've met the rulers, but how on earth did they manage such a huge, diverse territory? Let's pull back the curtain and look at the actual machinery of the Gupta state. You know, unlike the Mauryans before them, who were super centralized, the Guptas were much more decentralized. They divided the empire into provinces, called Bukti, and then into districts called Vishya. This gave them a more flexible grip on things. But here's a key detail. They started granting land to officials as payment. Now that worked well at the time, but it planted the seeds for a feudal system that would eventually weaken the emperor's power. Okay, now we get to the heart of it all. Why do we call this the Golden Age? Because with all that peace and prosperity, culture just exploded. Art, literature, science, it all flourished like never before. This is the Gupta legacy. I mean, this was the time of the legendary poet and playwright Kalidasa. Sanskrit became the language for high literature and philosophy. In art, you get the absolutely breathtaking murals in the Ajanta caves. And in technology, get this, the Iron Pillar of Marali in Delhi. It's a marvel of metallurgy that has stood there for over 1,600 years without rusting. Just incredible. And that cultural explosion was matched by an absolute revolution in science and mathematics, a revolution that would echo across the entire globe. What was the single most important innovation to come out of this era? It was this: zero, the concept of nothingness as a number. It sounds simple, but this idea was completely revolutionary. It transformed mathematics from just a tool for counting things into the powerful, abstract system we rely on today. The genius behind this was the mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata. He didn't just pioneer zero, he developed the decimal system. His work in astronomy was just as groundbreaking, and these ideas didn't stay in India. They spread, forming the absolute foundation of modern math and science as we know it. But as it goes with all great empires, the golden age had to end. After centuries of ruling, the magnificent Gupta Empire began to weaken, and then it collapsed.
And it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of problems. Those constant wars against the Hunas were draining the empire's money and manpower. After Chandragupta, there is a string of weaker rulers who just couldn't hold things together. The economy started to slump, and remember those land grants? Well, they created powerful local lords who started to challenge the emperor's authority. By 550 CE, it was all over.
So let's do a super quick recap. Founder, Chandragupta I. Greatest conqueror, Samudragupta of the Prayag Prashasti. The cultural high point, that was under Chandragupta II. The rockstar scientist, Aryabhata, the father of zero. And the biggest external threat, those Huna invasions. So in the end, what is the legacy of the Guptas? I think this quote sums it up perfectly. If the Mauryas hammered India together into one political state, it was the Guptas who gave that state a rich, vibrant, and lasting cultural identity. Their golden age wasn't just a moment in time. It defined classical India, leaving a legacy in art, literature, and science that still inspires us today.